So last week we were talking about different lenders when it comes to either a mortgage company or a bank type lender. And my ultimate goal there was to eventually talk about portfolio lending and construction loans. And this is something we're able to offer also at First Heritage. Is one of the great reasons why we work here is we're able to offer a variety of products for people. And for construction lending, the question we often get is, what's my payment during the construction phase? Like, what's my payment as the builder's taking draws and disbursements? And the other big question is, well, my payment's changing based upon the amount of money that's given to the builder. And overall, I'm paying interest during this construction or build phase. And how much interest am I really paying? And I think Drew has kind of one of those unique, very simplistic ways to approximate how much interest is really paid during construction, because you're going to watch us go through some payment scenarios, and you can see it's kind of tedious and it's going to take us 10 or 15 minutes to go through a payment scenario, but we can actually do this really within like 60 seconds to know how much interest that you would pay during your construction phase. And I just think it would be hugely valuable for people to know this information. So I'm going to kind of let Drew take over here, and I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go through a couple of scenarios and just give a theoretical build and construction scenario. So let's take it over, Drew.
Yep. Yeah, I think Alice is going to show us a piece of paper so that we can sort of follow the math, so to speak, which is going to be helpful. It's really, it is math about how we do this. And we're going to use an example of $1 million property. That means we're going to break the lot down and say $200,000, and the cost to build is $800 for the $1 million project. So we choose that because 20% down is your down payment, and the land represents your down payment here in this case. You don't need any additional down payment if you already own the land, and most of our borrowers will buy land first. It's difficult to put a lot in a contract and then go straight into building, because you got to find the builder, you got to design a house, and the sellers of these lots want to close like a normal closing period of 30 to 45 days. It's just impossible. So we get lot financing, or we get borrowers to pay cash for lots who, are going to build in the future. So the lots to equity, the $800,000 is the cost to build. And so if the $800,000 is the cost to build, people say, well, this is going to take me a year to build. What's it going to cost me to build a house? Right, Alex? That's what they typically ask.
That's right. Yep.
So, if you think about it from a standpoint that my loan amount's $800,000 and I'm going to get like a prevailing 30-year fixed rate today, the rates are probably around 6.5 to 6 3/4. So let's use 6 3/4 because they don't seem to be going down. Excuse me. And if you use that payment example, your payment's around $51.50 a month, a little over $60,000 a year if it's a little over $5,000 a month.
Can you give me that number again, Drew?
So it's around $51.50. Not exact. I just know that's roughly what it is. It's a little over $5,100 for a 30-year fixed rate at 6 3/4. So, obviously that's, if you know that times 12, that's $60,000 a year. It's going to be sort of interesting what the final number is about what you might expect to pay in interest cost over a construction period of 1 year, when you think about the cost for 1 year of ownership once this house is built, it being about $60,000 a year in principal and interest payments. Much of that is interest, of course. So it is complicated, and there's lots of variables. Wouldn't you agree, Alex?
There's a lot of variables, because how long is it going to take to build, and how many draws are going to be given to the builder? Those are the two biggest variables: length of time and how many draws are actually paid to the builder. And I think it's good to mention that most of the builders on the Outer Banks, most of them, can't say for everybody, but they don't typically take 12 draws to build. It's typically smaller amount.
I'd say 4 to 8, somewhere in that range, is typically what they take. And some of them are right in the middle, obviously, it's draws. So anyway, the complexity of it is that you're not being charged any interest on money that's not been dispersed to your builder. So the first draw we pay your builder is 10%, $80,000 in this case, because there's nothing there and he needs some working capital. So that $80,000 is dispersed at closing at whatever random day in the month that we might close. But if we close, for example, on the first day of the month, your billing cycle is only 15 days for that first billing cycle, because all payments for construction loans are cut on the 15th. So you're only going to accrue interest on that first $80,000 for only 15 days. So let's say, for example, you closed August 1st. Your billing cut cycle is the 15th of August, 15 days of interest. You don't get that bill till the end of the month, because that's just the way the mail works. It's U.S. Postal Service is how these bills are sent to you, because you can't do automatic draft, typically speaking, for these draws because of the way they're set up. Although some banks are going to that, but still, the bottom line is a lot of times you don't get notified that you're paying it until at least the 25th, time the statements are cut. It seems like, why is this payment so low? It's only around $225 to $250 is that first payment on interest only on $80,000. I think it's actually closer to $250, Alex, if you do it at
really 180. You want to do it at 180?
Yeah, the $80,000 is really closer to $250. That's not a big difference. You got $225 there, but that's roughly what your payment's going to be. It's really $250. And you'd use during that $80,000. I'd also use a slightly higher rate than 6 3/4, because rates are really a little higher on construction financing periods typically.
Well, how are you getting to? Hold on for a second. How are you getting 250? Because when I do the math, the 80,000 times 0.0675 times 15 divided by 360 is 225. I mean, that's what it is.
It is. I was probably going to do it at 7.5, and that's what makes it 250.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're just talking about a variances of rate, really, because we don't know the exact rate.
It's a good point. That if the rate is during construction is 6 3/4, then that's the amount of interest you're going to pay during the construction period. If it happens to be 7.5, it would have been 250. Right.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
So in that first payment is 250. The second billing cycle, you're going to pay essentially double that, because that was 15 days of interest. So you can double that payment and it's going to be 450. Your builder still hasn't gotten another draw. So you've only paid so far, one payment for 225, another payment for 450, and you're into the second month. And the third month, your builder might come get a draw, and he's going to get a draw, let's say for, 20% of $800,000. That's going to be a draw amount of like 160. Right, Alex?
Yep. I think that's pretty accurate.
Yep. So if we're doing $160,000, we want to calculate the interest on it. Again, that $160,000, because it's chosen at some random point in the month, doesn't get 30 days worth of interest on it. It gets probably 15 to 20 days worth of interest charged on it. So again, now you've got that old payment that's 450 that's out there on the old money, but the 160 for just the 15 days is you just take the math of 160, multiply it, like Alex said, times the rate, which he's got here at 675, multiply it times 15, the number of days we're trying to collect the interest. You divide it by 360, and that gives you $450 as a payment on that full $160,000. I think that sounds like a small payment, don't you, Alex?
Yeah, it's a really small payment, but don't forget you have to add on the 80,000 as well. The other
450 payment, right? So now in that third month you made a $900 payment. In the fourth month, let's say the builder doesn't actually get a draw in that fourth month because you just got $160,000. You're going to have a $900 on the 160 plus the 450, so you're at $1,350 in the fourth month of the payment. So I don't carry this all the way out in talking to borrowers, but I try to give you an understanding of how upfront we don't really charge you a lot of interest in costs, to you as a consumer. It also just points out the construction loans and sort of why lenders like them and why they don't. They're not making a lot of money quickly at these low interest payments. And so it's one of the reasons that some lenders really sort of shy away from construction lending. They don't view it as really profitable. And unfortunately, profitability of banks are pretty known for being greedy, I think. Consumers think, and I do think this is one of their greedy sides when they don't want to make these loans because they're not that profitable. But
all right. So for quickness of time here, because we don't want to take too long, how would you do it if you were doing it in a minute, like I talked about in the very beginning of the video?
Yeah. So after I go through this process of sort of showing you how these payments are accrued, the best way to do it is you take your loan amount, which is $800,000. Okay. We think it's going to take a year to build it. So, and we think we got a rate of 6.075, so 675, and we multiply it times half of the number of days in a year, which is 180. And then we divide it by 360, the number of days in a year, and we get total interest payments that way. So it's really $800,000 times 0.0675 times 180, half of a year, divided by 360, and that gives you a payment of $27,000.
Well, not a payment's total cost of interest.
Total cost, your total payments over 1 year to build a house. A little less than half. I thought that number was interesting. It's essentially, you probably almost can do this think about it. Whatever my payments are going to be over the next 12 months, if I said it was $60,000 for the life of the loan, it's probably going to be about half, which is pretty much what we just did. It's a little less than half at $27,000. So it's another sort of quick way to do it. You could say, oh, my payment's going to be $5,000 a month. I cut that in half. That really is going to be a good way to think about what it is. But this is more scientific from the standpoint of you're using a real math as to just taking a number and cutting it in half. You're using the actual rate, the loan amount, the assumed number of days, and so on and so forth. Now, I would also tell, what are you going to say, Alex?
I would say there's a variance of like $5,000 here. Don't you agree?
Yes, sir. That's exactly where I was going. I was going to say to the borrower, I would look at your expense of interest could be as low as maybe in the $22,000 range, $5,000 less. It'd also be $5,000 more. And this is all dependent upon how many draws your builder gets. More draws, quicker, closer together, the more interest you're going to pay, and the longer he takes to build the house, of course, makes a bigger difference. If he finished the house in 9 months, this number is definitely smaller. And if he does it where he only got, say, 3 draws over 9 months, this number is significantly smaller. So, you could ask, if you really want to try to figure out some savings here, instead of saying, I don't want to spend as much money on the flooring or my appliances, ask your builder about his draw process, how many draws he's going to get, and, and what lump sum amounts and how quick he can build a house, because all that really helps you.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. Well, that pretty much sums up there. I think you want to say a few more things about what we can offer at First Heritage when it comes to construction loans and kind of end us out here, Drew.
Yeah, the thing about construction lending is it's a unique product. It takes a lot of time. We talk to consumers for a long time. So I embrace this type of lending. I like it. And I like the relationship you get with the builders and the relationship you get with the consumers. You're really helping people in a way that's different than buying a mortgage. And that's what's important. That's really a unique thing about one of the reasons that we like working for First Heritage. I've got several ways to help people get a construction loan with one-time closing or locking your rate or two-time closing. But, the example that is just most recent, we had a borrower who we were hoping that the property would appraise for a few $100,000 more than its cost because he owned the land for a while. And so we were thinking, it's going to appraise for more than your actual cost. In this example, 200 plus 800. It wouldn't be surprising to have it appraised for 1.1 or $1,050,000, and we would borrow on that amount. Well, it didn't appraise. And a lot of times I would just tell the borrower, oh, well, if you're at a bank, we only do 80% for second homes. We really can't do much more than that. We're not going to do more than that.
So we wouldn't have done the loan. There would have been no scenario to do it.
There wasn't in this case because the borrower didn't have the 20% to put down. He had a little bit, but he didn't have a full 20% to put down, or the additional equity that was being required. His land was paid for, but he still needed some additional equity. And so we were able to say, let's look at it a different way and do a 2 closing program and finance 85%. So we were able to finance 85% with a different program. And this way he got to build a house. And, that was the main thing. He wanted to build a house. And if a lender says, hey, we don't have anything above 80% for a second home or even for a non-owner occupied property, because a lot of CP programs are limited to 80%, bar none, and that's it. And so we were able to switch tactics and help that borrower. We also have a lot of borrowers who are very sensitive about cost. And, we've had borrowers say, God, this is expensive. Is there got to be another way to do it? And we've got ways that you can actually create credits and pay your closing costs for you too, to
That's
make these construction loans really have very little cost at all in getting them. And maybe later, because everybody thinks rates are going to be higher, you're refinancing. And that makes a lot of sense in today's environment because rates are higher. If you pay a lot of money in closing costs for this loan, it's sort of wasted if you're going to refinance it in 12 or 18 months when rates are lower, when the house is finished. So why pay a lot of money for that? We can give you and pay all your closing costs, which we do that sometimes for unique situations. It's not really that unique. It's just something that we can do for you in certain situations. That makes a lot of sense. And that's something we've never been able to offer before.
Right. So we're essentially, there's a closing cost number of fees for attorney, lender fees, appraisal, things like that, maybe $5,000 to $7,000. And what we're doing as a solution, because we think that rates, or clients do, the rates could be lower the next 2 years. We'll essentially pay those fees with a slightly higher rate, slightly elevated, but maybe about a quarter point higher. And then,
well, the rate we just did one was like, it's going to be like 7 3/8.
Yeah, and we paid all the closing cost for that loan,
right?
And then that way, the refi in the future is a really good opportunity. And it's really competitive rate. It's a competitive rate.
Yep, it's a competitive rate, and there's no closing costs. It's a little higher rate, but it's still competitive.
Yeah,
it's very competitive when you think you don't have to pay. It is, the closing cost is $7,000. It's really, to get it skinny down to $5,000. When you have the inspections, it's a different fee. You got a final inspection from the appraiser. Those are $1,500 right there. And normal closings, if it's $5,000, you're over $6,500 right there. It's hard to keep the cost under $7,000.
Yeah. All right. Well, we appreciate everybody watching. Please like and subscribe our video, and we'll talk to you next week.
Have a great week. Thanks a lot for listening.